Okay, since Orthodox King was so appreciative, I figured I'd do another video, part 2, for him on did Islam start out as a Christian sect? The answer is yes. Judeo-Christian. Judaizer, if you know what I mean. But let me take this down. Put that up. Really work good. Here's my childhood copy of Quran. Now you may remember me in the previous video speaking about other Kaaba. This is from a different culture than this. This is the Rahmani. This is a real cube. It's carved out of the living rock. This is the construction of, I believe Yazidis still could be the same thing. And here's another one, a different one. These are all pre-Islamic. Arab Christianity in the south through Ethiopia and Egypt. An Egyptian monk, Phimenion, the story of Najran and Ethiopian help, Al-Harab's attack at Kawa in the north, the Gasnid and the Lakhmid. That's what I'll be covering. Now, the story of the seven holy sleepers of Ephesus makes it into the Quran, and so does the slaughter at Najran by the Jews. Something else interesting in Surah Maryam, you'll notice that there's a lot of New Testament. I mean, the cave, Al-Kahf. The beginning part of this is about the holy sleepers of Ephesus. But there's something interesting in Surah Maryam. I believe it's 3 times. It says just in the surah, but far more in the Quran. I have a bookmarked here. Then it came forth people from the sanctuary and signified to them, glory to your Lord at the break of day and at the fall of night, and it is said unto you, his son, O John, hold fast the scripture, and we give him wisdom when a child, the compassion from our presence, the purity, and the devout. This is speaking of Jesus now. The dutiful towards his parents. He is not arrogant or rebellious. Peace be on him the day he was born, the day he dieth, and the day he shall be raised alive, or resurrected. And make mention of Mary in Scripture when she had withdrawn from her people to the chamber looking east. And then Christ says upon himself, glorious day I was born, day that I will die, the day that I'll be resurrected again. But in Surah Al-Baqarah, it talks about this Gnostic view where there was a substitution, like Simon of Cyrene or Judas was crucified in his place. But in more places in the Quran, it talks about Christ's death, birth, death, and resurrection, because that was central. The Rahmani, also known as the Hanif, are very important. Again, they lived in the Sinai, but they spread out, and they believed in Abraham, Moses, and Jesus, and John the Baptist, but they weren't Christians or Mandaeans or Jews or Israelites or Samaritans, but they were monotheists, and they called God Ar-Rahman, which begins every surah of the Quran. The books that the Quran tells you to read before reading it is the Torah and the Injil. This is shorthand for Old and New Testament. But 300 years later, the Sunnis came along and they had this bulwark of 6,000 ahadith. 6,000, or no, 700,000, sorry, 700,000 ahadith. And a man named Bukhari, and this is 300 years afterwards, and the guy was living in Baghdad, whittled it down to 2,200. Now people will say 4,000, but many of those are doublets, meaning it's the same story, right? And that's the most reliable for the Sunni, and so they don't need the Old New Testament. They say it's corrupt, although the Quran says that these works will be preserved forever. Now, the stories that they tell about how the Quran was received and how the gospel was received are strikingly Manichaean. Remember, Mani, his parents were Alkazites. You know, the Judaized Christians that the 40-foot angel gave them the book that descended from heaven that existed forever. And he synchronized Christianity and Buddhism and Zoroastrianism, and he said that he was the Paraclete. And he was executed, and then his followers were Manichaeans. Augustine of Hippo was a Manichaean before he became a Christian. This should sound very familiar to you because the Muslims claim that Muhammad is the Paraclete. So these Christian heresies, they even make mention of the Trinity, right? Do not say three. It doesn't say Trinity. It really, thalathatin. Threeness. Do not say threeness, right? Say one. For God is not Mother, Son, and Mary. A heresy believed by the Coloridians, and they had been dead. Their sect had been extinct for hundreds of years. The Quran is a collection of apocryphal stuff, bits of the Jewish Targum, some stuff from extra canonical New Testament works, canonical New Testament works, retold in an oral way, because Quran means recitation, and it's a mismatch. And it points back to reading the Torah and the Injil, and it says they pervert them with their tongues. Never, but Allah keeps ensuring that those books will never be changed ever. And it actually gives a command to say that go to the Christians and let them judge between this book, and they will tell you if it's true or false. And their judgment will be correct. And remember, the oldest copies of the Quran, such as the top copy, the Samarkand, and the Sanna, don't have the same amount of surahs. The diacritical marks are in different places. And let's not forget that even to this day, some of this is untranslatable. And every Quran you see, the Arabic portion of it, I'll show it to you. This part, which is the Quran, was standardized in 1927 Cairo. Now we're told that the Qibla faced Jerusalem until the angel Jibreel took the shoulder of Muhammad and moved him towards Mecca. Well, Mecca didn't exist at that time, and as I said, all the flora and fauna in the Quran, like being within daily seeing the Dead Sea and the destroyed cities around the Dead Sea, grape vineyards, olive orchards, date orchards, mountains, rivers, farmers, herdsmen of cattle and sheep, men on horseback, uh, the spice trade, as well as a heavy population of Christians and Jews. Now, let's not forget that when Protestants call Catholics pagans continually. This is a slander. So the pagans and the heathens and the idolaters that are getting talked about. Remember, the iconoclast and iconophile war of words mainly was raging at this point. So a Catholic and a Catholic / Orthodox get called the ones that adhere to ancient iconography are idolaters, are pagans, right? In the eyes of an iconoclast, in the eyes of the Calvinists, we're polytheistic. The only place this could have taken place is in the Levant, near Jordan, Palestine, Syria. And Mecca never gets mentioned, but Becca does. And they say, well, this is just Mecca. Unfortunately, Becca is a valley. And it's in the Levant, right? And so is that stone structure. The Gilead or the Yeger Shadut, which is on their coins. It's a pillar. They took off the cross at one point and put the pillar. And their Qibla pointed towards either Petra or Memre. And it wasn't until a Tibetan, about 150 years after the beginnings of the Saracen raids, because I don't believe the Rashidun Caliphate existed, it just didn't. I believe Muawiyah was made a kind of Caesar. That's when this place called Mecca was invented, because it's on the other side of a ridge of near mountains in the middle of a desert that can't grow anything. And the trade routes would be, you would just travel down the Red Sea. Why stop? But Avdat to Haran to Hira is not a cave, again, because the diacritical markings didn't come in until hundreds of years later. Hira was not the cave where the revelations are at. Hira was a sacred city of the Lakhmids. So you had Haran, Ur, Hira, Avdat, Jerusalem, which was at that point called the Aelia Capitolina. And initially the people thought they were Jews because they were clearing the temple and rebuilding it. And then they had to destroy that, at that time, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and rebuild it again. They did it with the Church of Nea. Read what the non-Muslims wrote about these invaders, which they'd never called Muslims. They didn't know they had a holy book, and they didn't know they had a new religion until much later on. You have the Doctrina Jacobi. There's a website that I'll put the link below to, and you can see all the references of people writing about these people. They call them Taeya, the Banu Tay, the Hagarenes, the Ishmaelites, the Saracens, but they did not call them Muslim. Muslim meant believer. And the Quraysh wasn't a tribe. Quraysh was meant confederation. Because remember, the Byzantines and the Sasanians, the Persians, fought a 30-year-long war that exhausted them both. But there were two client states, auxiliary states that actually still had standing armies and that were battle hardened. The Lakhmids and the Ghassanids. Now the Lakhmids were crushed. Remember, because the king became a Christian, he wouldn't give his daughters over as concubines, so he was crushed to death with elephants. His army picked up and went into the Kinda, and when the time was right, raiding. So they justified it with this book, right? As liberators, and they didn't attack fortified cities. They weren't brave. I mean, even the canonical Sunni rendition of events has Muhammad attacking unguarded caravans. There's a chapter or a surah called the Spoils of War, another called Booty, as in loot. This might not upload. Hold on.